prove that out. And I think the latest studies with the FBI is pretty concerning to companies, because as an employer, the employees are agents of our company and we're responsible for all their actions. And so they're using it, Rick, as vias to get in and steal company information or customer information. It's putting us all at risk.
Yeah, I totally get that. So, why? So it's putting us risk and costing companies millions of dollars. But what else? Like, why should a company pay attention to this?
Because they run the risk of incurring millions of costs. They run the risk of being sued. They run the risk of totally damaging their reputation. And some companies may never recover from that. You see constantly about data breaches. Yeah. And some of these, these data breaches or this identity theft access that's happening could be the undoing of a complete company. You may never make it back. And a lot of the different companies that are trusted agents, integrity and trust is what they're selling. And so how do you make that back if someone on your team actually stole customer information, used it for nefarious reasons, or even took the information from an identity theft perspective? So it's concerning, and it's going to become more concerning the more virtual our workforce is. And just like you said early on, Rick, it's a fight for talent. We're always in the hunt for talent, but it doesn't take the responsibility off of us to be certain we're hiring who they say they are.
Yeah, and this can be mitigated too by just slowing down. I mean, like, honestly, if you run your search process and you do the diligence, and I think that's the biggest mistake companies are making, is they're just not doing diligence when it comes to hiring somebody. They're rushing into it, they're getting the position filled, and then okay, on to the next. Let's move on, right?
Yeah, so, like I said, it's perfunctory. A lot of times it's just perfunctory to get the candidate in, make the deal. But again, the worry that I have, and the market is proving this out, is Becky who she says she is? And yes, I'm going to talk to some people that know her. I'm going to run a background check at the way that we're talking about. But how do I know that Becky wasn't John Smith, 20 years ago, and took on the identity? Or Becky works for these other bad actors like you talked about early on, Rick, and has malicious intent coming into the company.
Yeah. Are you listening to what's that?
No, I'm saying that, to me, that's key in terms of a call to action to all of us leaders, CEOs, et cetera.
Got it. All right, you're listening to Higher Power Radio Show. I'm your host, Rick Girard, and for our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors. Hey, check out stridesearch.com. There you'll find a link to order your copy of Healing Career Wounds. Let it be your company's secret weapon to landing the strongest people. Our guest today is Becky Wanta. She is the CIO and CTO of 5QID. And we're talking about really bad actors infiltrating your company and how to avoid it. So we just talked a little bit about why it's critical that you listen to this and kind of recognize the fact that it is a problem, or it's a growing problem. And now we're going to talk about how to solve the problem, right? So, Becky, it seems to me that I have my own thoughts on how we can solve this, and really comes back to, like what I mentioned earlier, diligence, right? And making sure that the people that you are hiring, but just taking it a step back too, even though we're in this feeding frenzy for talent, there's an easier way to find people than post and praying, and that's identifying people, targeting them, and developing relationships and kind of creating a proactive pipeline of talent. If we do that mitigates a ton of this from the perspective of, at least you're developing a relationship with somebody who maybe came through a referral or some other mechanism, or maybe you even just kind of located them on LinkedIn. But that's the start of the process for me, is really like changing the way in which you're reacting to the market, slowing it down rather than speeding up, and making sure that when people are good for your company, they will take the time to go through the interview process. What do you think?
I think that you'd hope that most people are doing what you just said, right? But we're seeing evidence that suggests that, like you've said before, maybe the diligence isn't there. I mean, the piece that's still even if you've set these networks up in place, you've got these long-term relationships, it still doesn't guarantee Becky is Becky. It guarantees you like Becky and she looks like she's qualified on paper, but it doesn't really guarantee to you that she's all of her connects and so forth are all above board. We're seeing more evidence of that with different, the whole sharing of information that goes on. And the other challenge we have too is that slowing down isn't really an option because for the reasons you mentioned: one, winning the war on talent, and two, staying competitive and relevant in the industry you represent. And so how does an employer, how does a manager attract that talent, but then really protect the brand, protect the company? And so the way that I add, so adding on to what you said, I think the other thing you have to do is you have to tighten up the whole background process. It can't just be about their credit checks. It's got to be really going the extra, using things like biometric, proving liveness, proving, we use a combination of AI and other tactics, plus the live interview, government IDs and stuff like that. So with our IP and stuff, that's how we prove out the idea. And we make sure Becky is Becky, and we make sure that the company is protected, that's hiring all that. So I think companies need to keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive while building these distributed teams like you're talking about, because the ability to win the talent, run the virtual workforces, do exactly what you just said, Rick, is not going to get easier. It's going to get more complex.
Okay, so I want to get away from the product just yet.
Yeah,
so let's talk about specifically, so what is it that a company needs to do to prove somebody's identity? Is there really a way to do it? Because when you talk about background checks, some background check companies, if you're doing that, some background check companies, they do more than just a credit check or something else. I mean, they do criminal history and a bunch of other things.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
But how are you able to, if I'm at the stage where I'm about to hire somebody and I'm doing my diligence and we're doing a background check, how can I guarantee that Becky is Becky, right? So what do I need to put in? I have to put a system in place in order for me to figure this out, right? So what does that system look like?
I think it's you tightening up your processes around the whole pre-employment and background checks.
Okay, I think so what works for that?
So you've got service providers right now that you trust to do your background check, but you now want the ability to allow your employers or pre-employees, to it's not just about a government ID. It's about, adding their own personal identifiers that they control, you don't control, and then taking it all the way into the liveness checks and things like that, so I would say you want to adopt a proven identity process married to your biometrics.
Okay, I don't know that. So I'm not sure what biometrics means. So explain that to me.
Okay, so the one thing about, the biometrics are really more your personal identifier. So a face scan, a palm scan, just those two tactics alone in terms of your hiring process. Now that's an employee or pre-employee. Just with that alone, Rick, coupled with some other things, you've got a very strong false acceptance rate that person is exactly who they are. Because just like you said, you check the natural, all the different, federal different criminal databases and stuff like that. So you get that, but then you have an ability between the combination of all those things to really guarantee Becky is Becky. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so are you saying that you have to put systems in place that essentially, okay, before we make you an offer, we need to get your fingerprinting and do a biometric, we need to actually make sure you are who you are?
I think you do a combination of four things, right? So the background check, like you've defined, the use of personal identifiers, which will be a combination of some types of biometrics that the employee controls. The notion of the liveness, and the last thing is a quick, interview that takes like 13, 15 seconds to say, I've talked to this person, this is exactly who it is, it fits all of the other markers that I've got. But all that together from a automated perspective will give you a better acceptance and highest level of assurance. The person you're hiring is who they say they are.
Okay, so but for me, I'm thinking that look, I I just need to hire somebody, right,
I
who's
know.
good,
Yeah.
who can do that, who aligns with my values of my company. And I can gather that data through an interview process. But
Yes.
does it really matter if Becky was somebody else 10 years ago and under a different name? I don't know if that really matters to me so much, just as long as there's no criminal history. And then, then I also think about it in terms of, if I'm going to add another loophole to the hiring process and say, okay, well, we're going to make you an offer, but I also need to have you come in and hand printed, and we need to take a snapshot of your face so that we know you are who you are. Don't you think that that's going to be another hurdle that's going to potentially get people to duck out?
I think that, it's not about taking a snapshot of your face, right? It's a really
Okay.
aliveness check to make sure. So it's not really a selfie, but I think it will if there's something to really hide. But you're not trying. As hiring managers, we're not trying to disqualify the candidate. We'd really like to hire them. However, we don't want to take the risk to our companies either. That puts our companies out of business because we've introduced an element that may have, you know,
But it
criminal.
seems to me, if I am a bad actor, right, I'm going to create
Right.
probably like a profile. Like, I'm going to build up my backstory
You
first
are. Yes.
before I can get in there. So, there are a lot of people that don't have social profiles. There are a lot of people who essentially, like, they might have some ulterior motives. But how you're going to, like, how can you find a system that actually helps with that? I'm not
Well,
connecting
yeah,
the
I
dots.
mean, and that's why I said in the early beginning of the conversation about the need. It's not about identity management. It's about proven identity, because you're exactly right. The presence of deep fakes, the presence of personalities or personas evolving from within the networks. And we talked a little bit about this when we were
But
watching
how do you
Elon.
identify a deep fake, though?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's why it's just like you said, from a proven identity perspective, you need a system that proves identities so that in fact you can reveal the deep fakes. Because right now, bots and different things that happen in the dark web, different things that happen in all the pattern of information sharing create personas. And it's very easy, Rick, to take on. I mean, there's evidence now. You brought up the one about, you didn't have it happen to you personally, where you hired somebody, but somebody different actually came on the payrolls. Well, you saw the same thing, and you're seeing it now. Some of these collaboration tools, where it could look like you're having an audience with the various different people. It gets kind of scary, like a Minority Report movie playing out in front of your eyes. But there could be a conversation you're having in a Zoom conference room, which could be individuals that are not real, avatars. They could be personas that have evolved from the whole deepfake process. I mean, it sounds too stupid and scary to be believable, and that's our risk.
It doesn't. I mean, it's, it might be, but I mean, the truth is, it's probably happening, right? I have heard that story from somewhere. I don't know where, like, I haven't experienced it, right? So, what do you do then if let's say I hire somebody who's remote, right? They do the interview, a different person shows up to the next Zoom meeting and is doing the work, but is probably working under that person in some of the risk.
Could be that. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I mean,
you've got a different actor, you've got something else that's going on there.
and how do you guarantee, Rick, that person, so even if it's working for the person you hired, number one, is that a trusted agent that should have access to your company stuff, and be involved in your company decisions and so forth. I mean, you're going to see more and more of this, because the more global with boundaries that we run through. I mean, you're going to see more and more of these risks to companies, and that's why the call to action is now. I mean, you really have to focus, I feel, on the proven identity. And again, it's just because I've seen what can be.
I would argue that, like, your interview process is easy to hack, right? So I think really you should focus too also on tightening up your interview process, right? You should have a really structured interview process that your people are trained on, and they know how to have conversations with people that are more than just the surface conversations of tell me about how many years of this you have, and then tell me about this project. There needs to be a deliberate process that allows people to gain evidence to support making a decision. And that's really, and people should be evaluated for values first, skills second, as opposed to the opposite. From an interview perspective, behavioral interviews are the best way to do that because they really help you get to that BS meter quickly, right? And bad actors might be really good at being bad actors, and they might be good at like certain parts of the interview. But when you get under the hood of things, they're gonna crack. And I think that's a great way to mitigate that problem in the first place.
Well, and I think what you're also saying is there's no silver bullet here. Rick, it's a combination and it's a systematic approach to really being sure that the person you're hiring is who you really want to hire, in my view. And the combination of things you've talked about, the established networks. But there's so much information out there that it is realistic for someone with different agenda than trying to win with you in an interview, which, that's that's the price of entry. But we can't compromise on finding the best people and attracting the talent. That's what we're all driven towards. Right.
All right. So talk to me about the proven identity method really quickly. And maybe you can tell us about your product and how this works because.
Yeah, I'm not big on the sales side. So all I can say is that, yes, we have built a product that is focused on that for the problems that we've seen. And it uses a combination of, biometrics, liveness checking, artificial intelligence, and derivative models. So we don't store biometrics or anything. But what happens is you get one identity proven, and you're going to see industries go more and more in that direction because, Uber drivers, gig workers, all those types of things where, it's very dynamic and, the brand of the company is still very much at risk because they're all agents of your company. So you're going to, I see that as a possibility. So, we've been focused on that. And as far as I know, no one else has.
Got it. Okay. Well, shoot, we're getting pretty close on time. What would be 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give the audience that can plug into their business today?
I'd say the big one is we never want to compromise on winning the war on talent, right? And we never want to forget that, we're in the business we're in the business of the business as a company. And, our products to support customers, just like anybody else, are top of mind. And we should never be lax on proving and exciting our new employees on who they are and winning and wanting them to be part of our company. So we're out there working hard to do that and never be lax in finding out if employees are working for a criminal element. I mean, and it's not a one and done. Once you hire them in, there's still certain things you want to be safe on. So I'm pretty excited about being able to win the war on talent, but I also want to be aware of these kinds of things too.
Yeah. Well, I think also asking, what other side hustles do you have going on? Because everybody's got a side hustle these days, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
What other side hustles are you working on? I have this small project I work on. I don't know. It's a group maybe called Anonymous.
Oh, that's
Becky. Thanks so much for your time investment today. I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio Show. Now, what would be the best way in which members of the audience can find your company?
Just go out to q5id.com and you'll see all the information. I think, Rick, you have my contact information. Happy to talk anytime to anyone on this and why it matters.
Okay, sounds great. All right, I want to thank you for listening to this week's episode of Higher Power. Quick thanks to our team, Brian Colburn, Andrea Ballin, and Ayla Gerard. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share after all this show's for you. And keep sending those recommendations on to different topics, actually, that you guys want to find out. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Hire, H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, Radio, R-A-D-I-O.com, or you can drop me a line at rick@stridesearch.com. Tune in next Tuesday. It's going to be another solo show based on one of the topics that you guys have all requested. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to recruitment success, Rick Girard.